All right, I think we need to talk about the Ukraine sitch as it's going on right now.
In a very casual way, apparently.
Yeah, it's time to check in with old Zelensky and what's going down. So,
I was just going to ask, is our money being well spent? Is it finally going to come to an end?
well, it might come to an end quite soon if the Donald's got anything to say about it. So it does seem to be that the consensus on all sides is that once Trump gets in, he's going to sort of crack the whip and sort of insist, at least from the Ukrainian side, draw this thing to an end, dude. For God's sakes. It's ridiculous. So a few things have happened in the last few days, couple of days, or last week or so. A few different things. So I just thought we could run through them, keep everyone up to date with what's going on. I've said before somewhere or other that sometimes wars sort of fizzle out, but often they reach a pitch or a crescendo near the end, in terms of body count, if nothing else, quite often. This is going to be one of those, where they know they're going to be forced, more or less, in inverted commas, forced round a table, a negotiating table at some point quite soon, well, in the early new year. And so trying to do everything that's in their interests before that happens. Both sides are doing that, So, okay, we are entering what seems like the final act of this particular tragedy. So the first thing to mention is the idea that the line was always for as long as it takes. I remember everyone from the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the top bods at the State Department to Biden himself, our leaders, the NATO leaders, anyone and everyone of every importance saying, we will stand by Zelensky in Ukraine for as long as it takes, or until the end of this current administration. They didn't. I've added that bit in because it's not going to be as long as it takes. So anyway, so a few, 3 or 4 or 5 sort of developments we could sort of just mention and talk about. So Starmer talked to Trump on the blower the other day on the telephone, didn't he? Apparently, and he said, what's the headline there? He's supposed to have said that he's begged or asked Trump to stand with Ukraine because for some reason Starmer is particularly bellicose on the Ukraine thing, isn't he? He's particularly hawkish.
Yeah,
it seems. Wonder why he really cares one way or another. What dog in the game has he got?
Well, it's not the British people's business which side wins because, of course, we've put the most money out of any European country into supporting Ukraine. And I do wonder what we get out of it, being the most geographically separated from Russia out of any European country.
Right, yeah. I just wonder what the calculation is. Because, I can understand, I completely don't agree with it, but I can understand why planners at the State Department or the Pentagon or wherever, the American intelligence services, I can understand their calculation that on the broadest geopolitical stage, Russia is a competitor or a threat, especially when you look at just sort of the chessboard when it comes to resources, when it comes to energy. I get it from America's point of view that Russia is, to put it mildly, a competitor, right? I get it.
I think
what Britain, why would someone like Starmer be way more bellicose than others?
I think the current paradigm for most things in politics, both domestic and geopolitical, is that quite often things will be wrapped up in a sense of morality of right and wrong, but that will be a cover for the reality of a situation, which is normally just resource extraction. It's all about material goods a lot of the time. And once people stop taking it at face value and look at what people have to gain from it materially, it starts to make a bit more sense why so much money is being thrown at it.
Yeah, I mentioned in a podcast last week, there's an interesting podcast with Joe Rogan on that Mike Benz fella. Mm-hmm. He was talking about, it's a fairly good take, I think, that when you view the whole Russia-Ukraine conflict, if you view it sort of purely through the lens of power and energy and resources, then it does start making a lot more sense than who actually controls Crimea, right? Mm-hmm. Although that is important.
Because, of course, Britain historically didn't really much care. We did have the Crimean War, but then when we won the Crimea from the Russians, we gave it to the Ottomans, of all people, which wasn't a good decision. But
well, yeah. I mean, it's a different world. I was about to say, that was at like the Ottoman period, so it's sort of the mid 19th century. But still, yeah. So Keir Starmer, it seems like it's saber rattling though. It's just rhetoric and words, because most people now, even like the serious analysts, think that the Donald is going to bring it to a close, or at least dial it down to like a 1 or a 2 quite quickly. So when Starmer asking him to, stay the course,
I think
it's just words.
All of the discussion in the media has been setting up for a Donald brokered peace agreement, in that recently the news came out that a majority of Ukrainians support a peace deal. The admission that,
Well, we're getting on to that.
All right, I'll save it.
Okay.
Can I just say that I don't treat these statements in terms of whether they're true or false. I see them as expressions of resolution.
Okay.
So it seems to me that one of the reasons why Starmer could do this is to say that, wherever I can be a useful ally in any kind of alliance. If you have me on your side, I'm going to be a hawk.
Right.
Just a way to look at it.
It could be, you mean power projection?
Yeah, maybe I'm a bit too charitable.
And you think Starmer wants to keep the quote-unquote special relationship alive wherever possible? He's happy to be the State Department's bitch.
No.
What's a better word?
No, I didn't.
Happy with
Going full Tony.
I didn't say this. Just that
never go full Tony.
No, it's just that when it comes to foreign relations, I sort of like that.
That's going to be cropped out of context.
Yeah.
So another bit just from the UK side is that, that our government apparently is considering sending troops to train Ukrainians. Well, for a start, we've been doing that for a while. I think there has been sort of special forces, SAS, SBS, whatever it is, sort of training them for ages. I think it's a matter of record. It's not a conspiracy theory. And whether we'll send loads more over, well, it's all coming to an end. So it feels to me like this is... I mean, who knows? What I'm saying right now, this take could be proven completely wrong, and in 2 years' time, we've got like loads of regiments over there training hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. Could be wrong, but I feel like this is just a little bit of last-minute saber rattling. It feels like to me, right?
Well, when you're going to come to a peace agreement, you want as much collateral as possible, don't you?
That's what this is. I feel like.
Yeah.
I've mentioned before in the Vietnam War that it was prolonged for many a year, and all sorts of big. Like military kinetic campaigns were held just so their position at the negotiating table would be slightly better. So that's definitely how war is conducted often, is that a lot of money, treasure, material and blood, human misery is spent just to get a slightly better deal.
Yeah.
When you do have to sort of come to terms.
I think you're absolutely correct that now, just before it looks like it's coming to a close, will be an escalation, because presumably the Ukrainians would want to gain a part of Russia to try and exchange it with parts of Ukraine they've lost. As you say, because wars sort of intensify frequently before they come to an end.
Like the Kursk region.
Yeah.
Currently there's Ukrainian troops sort of in the Russian Kursk region, and feel like the Ukrainian government's thinking is that we'll exchange that back for some of the land that Russia is occupying.
I think what's likely to happen is that Russia's going to say we'd like some of the land we've captured, and the promise that Ukraine will at least try to stay neutral as much as possible, so they have a buffer between themselves and Europe. Because you can understand that if you have enemies right on your border, it is an uncomfortable situation, and perhaps they'll say don't join NATO or the EU or something like that. But it might be the case that there won't be enough bargaining power on behalf of the Russians to have both the land and making these demands about Ukraine. I think it's more of a matter of how good a deal are they going to get.
Will be interesting to see. I mean, interesting in a fairly dark, morbid way, but it'll be interesting to see how it does shake out. Assuming the Donald does get them round a table and insists they stop actually firing missiles and machine guns and drones at each other and things, how it will shake out. Whether Putin will in fact keep all the land that he's currently occupying and the Crimea and all that, or not. I mean,
Donald the pacifist.
Yeah, Yeah,
Stop this senseless violence.
the peacemaker.
Yes.
Um,
3 times Nobel Prize winning we're talking about here.
in the way that a 44 Magnum is a peacemaker. Right, yeah. So, one of the big developments in the last few days, well, this is actually from this morning, right? This particular Sky News article, but in the last hour or two, Zelensky is now sort of changing his line. The whole idea that we'll never ever sacrifice any of our land ever, and we'll stay for as long as it takes. Well, that line has now changed, and he's saying that it's just not possible for us to remove the Russian army. I nearly said the Red Army then. To remove the Russian army from their land. So I mean, there you go.
There seems to be a change of rhetoric.
That's the new reality.
I mean, we've known this for quite some time.
Well,
but it's different that he's admitted it.
That's what this article and many others that are in exactly the same vein say. They all say something we've known for a while now. Yeah, since right near the beginning, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder where all those billions and billions of dollars worth of material really went, though. That's what I was surprised. I thought, was it this summer just gone, or the summer before that, where there's going to be a big push from the Ukrainian side, a big summer offensive, and it just petered out and didn't really go anywhere at all. And I was at that point, for me anyway, that was sort of the final straw where I was like, well, it'll end with something like this at some point then, because if you weren't able to really make any significant gains, then you're probably almost certainly not going to.
I think also a fair amount of the resources that have been provided, particularly the financial resources, have gone into people's pockets because, of course, one thing that everyone's forgotten is that Ukraine is the most corrupt country, or at least was before the war, when people actually talked about it, in all of Europe. And throwing money at a very corrupt country is not good.
Yeah, vast sums of those monies just been embezzled by people. Absolutely, yeah. It's one of the most corrupt things. I mean, sometimes I get accused of being pro-Russian. I'm not pro-Russian at all.
It goes on in Russia as
I'm
well.
just anti-Zelensky. I'm anti that completely corrupt government. And I think it's an absolute tragedy how many Ukrainians and Russians have died unnecessarily.
Because, the Russians might be the aggressors in the situation, but they're fighting with conscripts who might not agree with the war at all. And to be grateful or, delight in Russian deaths when it's just young men, some of them, might not even be out of their teens, and they're dying for effectively nothing.
I am a bit, I haven't been sold entirely on this rhetoric, not because I think that Ukraine isn't profoundly corrupt. It is. But I want to look at it from a historical perspective. And it seems to me that if we look at the countries of Eastern Europe, especially after the fall of the USSR, we cannot just expect them to be as non-corrupt as we like to think we are in some places. So it seems to me that rather than look at it as an either or, corrupt or non-corrupt, it's much better to see it as an issue of trajectories. Is it going towards a less corrupt state or towards a more corrupt one? That's a question I put. But I respect the rhetoric. Yeah.
Before 2014, it was Ukraine was teetering between being sort of more European aligned or more Russian aligned, depending on who was in office at the time, and so it was quite unpredictable which direction it was going.
I mean, that's one of the things you said. Russia is the aggressor here, and it's their army that's on Ukrainian territory. Mm-hmm. But come on, reality was they were endlessly goaded.
Of course,
endlessly goaded.
I should have probably qualified that it's not as simple as that.
It's that classic thing: you keep poking someone in the ribs or in the eye with a stick, and then when they throw a punch, you say, "Oh, you're the aggressor. You started the fight. You threw the first punch." Ignore that I kept poking you with a stick. But anyway, but that is the rhetoric from the legacy mainstream media. It's just merely Putin's aggression. That's it. There was nothing. It was a completely peaceful situation, and then Putin, just because he's an aggressive dictator, decided to snatch a bit of land from the completely innocent sort of NATO-aligned bloc. I know Ukraine aren't in NATO, but from the Anyway.
Well, there was an agreement in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which the West went against. That was the main thing that goaded a response, wasn't it?
Yeah. I thought we could just watch a little clip from Sky News here.
Are we seeing the start of a path towards the end of war? After nearly 3 years of fighting, death and destruction, Ukraine's president has admitted, reluctantly, that his country may have to relinquish territory to Russia. In an interview with a French newspaper, he struck a thoughtful tone.
We cannot give up our territories. The Ukrainian constitution forbids us to do so, but we do not have the strength to recover them. We can only count on diplomatic pressure from the international community to force Putin to sit down at the negotiating table.
He's come
Seems
to
fairly
Brussels,
realistic.
the heart
Right, yeah,
of
that is
European
actually
diplomacy,
realistic
to meet
now.
NATO and EU leaders.
I think it's a very good opportunity to speak about security guarantees for Ukraine for today and for tomorrow, as you said. Well, almost everything said. So, but it's really very important that to use these 2 days in Brussels to meet with all our partners.
Alongside him, the head of NATO.
Sorry, you get the idea. I just thought I'd let Zelensky say some stuff, so it's not just me. I'm not accused of making stuff up or whatever. So, all right. So the next sort of development that's happened, people might have heard that North Korea, of all countries, sent quite a lot of men and some material to the front, in the order of 10,000 men, and BBC saying that 100 have died fighting. Some of the other headlines say it was in the hundreds. But certainly they have actually been thrown into the meat grinder.
I saw recently that Russia had donated 100 elite goats to the North Koreans. I don't know what qualifies as an elite goat, but
I didn't hear this.
A goat for every man.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they are capital if you think of it. They could be used as capital. As an investment.
outside of Europe and North America, they're used as capital pretty explicitly.
Really?
Goats. Goats, as in, you
need to be a shepherd.
I'll marry your daughter for 3 goats, sort of thing, right?
Oh, right.
No, I didn't mean this. You could use it as a source of income. You could produce
Food,
and
which
sell it.
the North Koreans do not have much of. Yeah,
Like milk and cheese and meat in the end.
Yeah.
that's the last thing lactose intolerant North Koreans would want. But there we go.
Okay.
They could export it.
The Guardian saying it's several hundred. That was a surprise to me when this happened, and it does sort of beg the question beyond just sort of the immediate sort of surprise of it. Like, what's the deal? What's going on there? Serious losses, ABC is saying, and even AP News saying that the North Korean troops are being thrown into it. So like what the relationship between the Kremlin and the North Koreans. What exactly is it? Well, apparently it is that, they're going to get, the North Koreans are going to get a bit of money, but more importantly, almost certainly, sort of a technology exchange. Probably, we don't know because it's all sort of behind closed doors, more or less. But boats.
Height of technology.
But like missile technology.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can see how, as I say near the beginning, I can see how the Russians are viewed by not just the Americans but the West as a competitor. I mean, you look at the Litvinenko and the Novichok stuff, and all sorts of things. The Russians flying fast jets near our airspace and all sorts of things. I get it. I'm not pro-Russian. I want to go on record as just explicitly saying that. And so it leads into this. Like, they're giving the North Koreans missile technology. Come on, really? In exchange for 10,000 guys fighting in Kursk.
Yeah,
Western governments are not going to look kindly upon that, are they?
It's only going to make things worse in the long run, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Yeah. CNN going for a slightly different one, say don't underestimate the North Koreans. Because in those articles, they were saying that the Koreans had made a load of losses because they're really inexperienced and they're sort of crap combat troops.
Malnourished.
They don't know what they're doing, really. But CNN decided to say, sort of, no, don't underestimate them. Don't really know why CNN is doing that, just being contrarian. God knows what or why.
Well, I suppose if you make out like the Russian side, it's more formidable. It justifies more money being sent to Ukraine, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we know CNN is, well, a cutout for the intelligence services in all sorts of ways. It seems to me. Okay, another talking point, another thing to mention that's gone on recently is an assassination, a murder of a Russian general. If anyone saw this in the news cycle the last few days. And the guy was quite important. He was a Russian general that was in charge of sort of their nuclear, biological and chemical side of things. So quite important dude. He was coming out of his flat, his house, his building, and a bomb went off and blew him up.
One would have to wonder why he's being targeted when the things he's in charge of are not in play currently. Is that a sort of sign that they're anticipating it, or? No,
well, they are. So one of the things that came under his purview was like the use of CS gas. Apparently, on that battlefront, because people think of CS gas as something that just makes your eyes water in a riot and makes people run away, and it's like and it can be that watered down CS gas is that, but very, very strong CS gas is can be fatal, absolutely. And apparently, it's being used massively by the Russians all over the place in that war zone, in that particular theatre. And that does come under his sort of command, all that sort of stuff. But so someone, and it was definitely Ukraine, because other headlines just say it was definitely Ukraine, like Ukraine admitted it. Yeah, we did this, yeah. So someone somewhere in the Ukrainian defence establishment, or God knows where or who, decided they're going to target this dude. Ukraine saying, sort of unapologetically saying, yeah, we did it. It's what we do now, that sort of thing. We did have a clip, but I don't know if it's worth playing because it's not really very explicit, but because you just see a massive cloud of smoke. But that clip is all over the internet if anyone wanted to see it. The other thing is they're just sort of saying now, because it's coming to a close, that at least from the Ukrainian side, they're becoming slightly more desperate, just saying they're openly prepared to resort to what is essentially terrorism, because that happened right close to, in the middle of Moscow, just a few miles from the Kremlin, blowing up a general in the middle of Moscow. It's difficult not to, it's not the battlefield, is it? So it's difficult to argue it's anything other than terrorism. In fact, if we could watch this clip, and let's just watch this clip.
The apparent assassination of General Kirillov is the most significant since the war began, and it happened just 4 miles from the Kremlin. But it's not the first time. In July, a Moscow car bomb targeted a military intelligence GRU officer and his wife, severely injuring them both. Russia blamed Ukraine, probably rightly. And last year, a pro-war military blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky, was killed in the cafe bombing in the centre of St. Petersburg. The first such attack like this since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine was also a car bomb, killing Daria Dugina in August 2022, just west of Moscow. She was the daughter of the ultra-nationalist Putin ally, Alexander Dugin. Now, Ukraine denies that it carried it out, but Moscow blamed them, and the Western allies reportedly said that they believed that Ukraine had ordered the attack. What makes Kirillov's assassination so significant is what it tells us about the way the war is going and where it might go in the coming months. Kirillov was in charge of CBN, chemical, biological, nuclear, by which we mean radiological, and he was in charge of the protection of Russian troops from those elements, chemical, biological, radiological. But his role went far beyond that. His actual behaviour was that he was involved in the planning of chemical warfare in Syria, and he's had a great deal to do, and that's what the British government think, with chemical warfare all the way around the front in Ukraine. The K-51 gas grenade, a grenade that carries CS gas, but in some cases in lethal concentrations, is ubiquitous all along the front. It's used all the time. And there have been traces of sarin and cyanide in a number of chemical attacks. The Ukrainians have said that the inauguration of President Trump, because we all believe that the political dynamics behind the war will begin to alter after the inauguration of the new president. And so both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, are pushing as hard as they possibly can for every ounce of military dominance before Trump takes over. And what the Ukrainians are doing, they're sending a message, not just to the Russians, but to the rest of the world, that we are fighting for our lives and we'll do whatever it takes. And if assassinations, which technically are terrorist, if that's what it takes, that's what we will do. That's the message to the incoming president.
Oh, right. Oh, all right then. What? Really? I'm surprised, honestly a bit surprised that Russia has shown such restraint in the broadly speaking. Because they could do tit for tat. They could decide to do that. They could drop some sort of precision munition on Zelensky if they wanted to. I'm sure they could. Or do some sort of... I mean, the Russians definitely assassinate people, don't they, all the time? That's one of their things they do. Mm-hmm. They'll get some sort of polonium-210 or whatever and murder their political opponents. They're showing some restraint, to be fair, I think. But anyway...
It could be that they've got American intelligence helping the Ukrainians, which is also preventing the Russians from doing the same. Or it could be that they want to keep Zelensky in charge because it's better him than someone more competent.
Yeah, someone they don't know, an unknown entity, some general who's even more crazy. I just hope the thing can come to a close as soon as possible. It's as simple as that.
Me too. Yeah.
The more Ukrainian and Russian lives, and anyone else, North Koreans, any other country that's sending men there, just stop the killing. You're not going to throw the Russian army out of that part of the world. It's not happening. So stop it. So last thing to say...
Zelensky, you've heard it here. Bo
Nobel Prize
Lotus
for Bo
has asked.
Yeah, pack it in.
Yeah. Peace Nobel Prize for you.
So last thing to say is that it's just about Trump. And yeah, he didn't like the killing of that general, which is essentially terrorism. Yeah, hopefully he'll bring an end to it in January. So we'll see how much it escalates between now and then, how down and dirty it will get in the last few weeks.
I hope you appreciate that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always watch us have fun on our Lads Hour series on the website. This time we were playing GeoGuessr. We got some great guesses there, really good streak as well. And if you want to see all the other things that we put out, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.